Welcome to the latest episode of 305 Vox Populi here in the studio at St. Thomas University. And with us today, we have a Miami legend, a South Florida legend, Willard Shepard. How you doing, Willard?
We're doing great, man. You sound very good coming out the box there, Mr. Mayor.
Listen, man, I'm nervous, man. Sitting next to you, somebody who's had such an amazing career, right? You're talking about 6-time Emmy award-winning journalist. You're talking about somebody who served our country, was a fighter pilot during the Gulf War, owns his own law firm, right? He's an attorney as well. He's a champion boxer. So, I mean, you've done it all in your career, right? You've seen that you've been on the mountaintop. But there's a bigger story. There's a why. And I think folks will love to hear that. The why. Why did you decide to serve our country? Why did you decide to be a journalist, an attorney? But let's start off with serving our country and making that commitment, which is so honorable. And thank you for doing that. But what's your why?
Well, first of all, I mean, our country has a lot of issues, and where we sit now is an extremely divided land, and we have our shortcomings. Especially for many people that live here in South Florida, of my genetics, and also, with a Latin background, our country has treated us unfairly, as history has shown many times. And people criticize our country. But I say it's the greatest country on the face of the earth, and for evidence, and your students now know I'm an evidence-based person.
Yep.
The fantastic thing that shows how great our country is that everybody wants to be here.
That is true.
Despite whatever our shortcomings is, and there's nothing that's perfect whatsoever at all, everybody wants to be here. And it's fantastic just in the room with the students here now and all of our backgrounds and everything. I was at, Mr. Mayor, I went to go get some blood drawn. And I was in an office where, let's just say they weren't as efficient as they possibly could be. And we had a cross-section of people. We had people that were speaking English. We had people that solamente habla español, were only speaking Spanish. We had people that were from Haiti that were only speaking Creole, and some were speaking actual French and those things along in there. And when a woman came out and said, "Hey, la siento, I'm sorry, we have a problem here," everyone brought it back to their native tongue. And they were all like, "We know you got a problem. What are you talking about?" And the people in Spanish were like, "Oh yeah, there's a problem." And everybody, I was like, wow, everyone was on the exact same page, and they used their native language to, which we won't say on your podcast, actually express their views. And I was like, wow, this is what makes South Florida fantastic. And we all need to embrace that and embrace all these great cultures that are around us, and it makes us better people. So therefore, that's one of my roots of saying, hey, look, I wanted to serve my country. I always wanted to be a fighter pilot. My heroes are the Tuskegee Airmen, the black fighter pilots from World War II that not only integrated the military, but, were the predecessors to our civil rights movements in the 1960s. And they opened so many doors for all of society. And I just wanted to follow in their footsteps. And I'm glad I had a chance to do that and actually develop a personal relationship with some of them. There are only about 10 Tuskegee Airmen pilots that are still alive.
Wow.
So we need to continue to embrace them and their legacy and live on. And actually, Tom Cruise in his latest movie paid great honor to them, because for those of you who've seen the movie, at the beginning and at the end, the plane he's working on is a P-51 Mustang. And that was one of the planes from the Tuskegee Airmen. And it's painted in a red tail. And the red tail is in honor of the Tuskegee Airmen because their fighter squadron had red tails on their airplanes. And the bomber pilots in World War II knew that they were in the best of hands when they would be in the formation and the red tails would pull up. And that's the Tuskegee Airmen legacy that all of us who follow in their footsteps try to do our best to live up to.
That's unbelievable, and I appreciate you sharing that. And it's an incredible story because following in their footsteps, I mean, you fought overseas, right? So not only did you sign up, but you risked it all. Where a lot of folks don't understand that freedom doesn't come free, that there are a lot of folks in your position who, I mean, listen, you had to fly over enemy territory, folks, I'm sure, shooting at you, SAM missiles, whatever. But when did you make that switch when you were in that fighter pilot, in the fighter jet? And was it during those moments that you said, you know what, I want to tell other people's stories. I want to help people by telling their stories on TV, by being what you are today, one of the most trusted voices in South Florida. I think we heard some of the stories earlier where a lot of folks get nervous about speaking to reporters, but when they see that it's you and you call, people are like, no, wait a second. Willard is going to tell, regardless if it's good or bad, he's going to tell the entire story. So how did that transition happen where you were following in the footsteps of the Tuskegee Airmen, you fought overseas for this country, and then you switched, you made that switch after serving honorably for many years to telling people stories?
Well, I always say, which is a good thing, I never been to Iraq, I just been over it. Which, as a fighter pilot, it's a good thing to happen.
That is true.
Okay? If I actually been to Iraq, and I got great respect, man, for, my son's a Marine. People that are in our ground forces and, flying over and looking down upon the circumstances that they find themselves in. I just have the ultimate and gigantic respect for the people in our Army and other branches of our service that are on the ground there. 1,000%. God bless them and the Lord bless them. So I'd say that, I came back from my time in the Middle East. I went back into the reserve system, and in total, I put 28 years in of service, stationed at Southcom sometimes during that time period. And now, today, I'm the officer for any kids that want to go to the Air Force Academy, and I am in our Air Force Civil Air Patrol program that I'm sure some of your Miami Lakes residents belong to. And we give kids rides, do search and rescue missions when people get lost, whether they're boaters or they're campers. If there's a storm, we have a photographer in the back, and that they go and take pictures that are given to FEMA and those types of things. So this is my 39th year of association with our Air Force in some format. And I always say, best flight school around, and I try to get as many people interested in airplanes that want to go to it. So there we go. To answer your question after that, when I came back from my time in the Middle East and went in the reserve system, I majored in communications in college. And in the 2 years before I got my pilot training slot, while I was waiting to go do that and hoping to get that opportunity, I worked as a television reporter in Pennsylvania and in New Orleans. And so when I went into the reserve, I went back to being a TV reporter in New Orleans and was flying the fighters. There were some days I'd get up in the morning and go fly A-10, and then I'd be doing the 5 o'clock news that night.
Wow.
And I did that for years, to doing both of them, for a very, very long time.
So, but at the same time, when did you decide after that? Because that's very interesting. Flying in the morning and reporting on the news in the evening. But were you going to law school at the same time? Because now...
Okay, now when I went to NBC and said, hey, look, I want to go to law school. I almost went to law school when I graduated undergraduate, but you have to be in pilot training by the time you're 27 and a half. So there's a clock ticking on that. I'm like, no, I'm going to go fly, first, and hopefully be able to go to law school later. And I went and said that, hey, look, I want to go do this. And I give NBC all the kudos in the world. NBC paid for me to go to law school, paid for me to get my bar license. And I think that it worked out great for both of us. I think that they got their money's worth.
You got that right.
All of that. And I was stationed at Southcom at the time I was in law school. So I had a flying job at that point where I would go down to Columbia and help their Air Force and other operational things that were going on and in planning at Southcom. At that point, I had made the decision that, I was commuting back and forth to actually fly the fighters. And I flew the fighters more than a decade. So I was at Southcom in a flying job, but I wasn't actually in the cockpit. At some point, most Air Force officers When they get to be a major, when they're coming up on lieutenant colonel, they have to take a staff job and learn more administrative, supervisory type duties along the way, and that happens in everybody's career. And so I made that decision, and so I was doing the news during the day. I was doing my reserve duty on the days that I needed to do that, and I went to law school at night.
Wait, that's amazing, because I think that work ethic is so important for our youth, especially those kids that are in high school. Some high school students here, college students, professors. I think people got to hear that, because Willard Shepard today, when you hear the name, there's incredible amounts of respect. But the grind, I don't think gets enough accolades. Just hearing that alone, doing the news, doing your reserve duty, and going to law school. There's a lot of folks that can't pull that off, right? But how did you do it? How did you do it all? Because I think that's and being a father, right, as well. And thank you to your son. That's incredible that now he's serving our country.
I try to get him on the airplanes, but he's like, no, I want to be Superman.
God
so
bless
he's
him.
Superman.
God bless him. Thank you.
Yep, Jamarco's Superman.
Shout out to him. Thank you for your service. But how did you do it? How did you juggle it all? Because it seems that a lot of folks in our society, it's hard for them just to deal. If you told them, I just got to do the news, they're like, oh my God, it's so difficult. I got to do. But you did it all at the same time. How did you do that?
Well, I would say that in terms of what I've said to the students here at St. Thomas today, hey, look, doesn't matter what your dream is, what it is you decide that you want to go do. Hey, God and the Lord give you the spirit and the determination. And with that determination, those who toil in the darkness when no one is watching are those who shine the brightest when the lights come on. So those moments in the darkness are what makes anyone have the ability to accomplish what they set out to do and be able to do things that you may not have thought about. We've just seen NASA come out and say, hey, here are the 4 astronauts that are gonna go, and fly, and go around the moon on the next mission. So that mission is not until November of 2024. So just think about the time between now and then, all the hours. There's no cameras there. There's nobody watching. They made the announcement. Hey, those astronauts and the entire NASA team, under Mr. Nelson's direction, are executing their responsibility in the darkness.
Wow.
So when the moment arises in November 2024, when the entire world is watching, when they hit the button, man, know it's going to go right.
Yep.
Okay? It's going to go right. And it's about executing that and managing your time appropriately. And you have to manage your time. You're running your restaurant. Yep. You're the mayor. You have your other businesses. And thank you for your service to our community. I always say people who go into service such as you ask for the pain and punishment.
That is true. Volunteer
and seek it. And it's a tremendous challenge to do what you're doing and do it with character and integrity as you are doing it in the times in which we live. It's extremely difficult. I don't think our founding fathers in any way, shape, fashion, and form, when our government structure was set up, from the federal level to the state level to the county level to the local level, could have remotely envisioned what it is that we're asking, what really are designed to be citizen servants, to put on your plate and their plate to do this to serve all of us. So I want to pay great respect and honor to you for being able to do that and do it as you do, not just with the time commitment, but with the things that are done and the things that are said, especially now on social media.
Oh, yeah.
That, come on, people are human beings, man. There's nobody wants to hear them or their family or their kids castigated or criticized for, no reason whatsoever at all. And that part of what you do, I have tremendous, great respect for. And you got to maintain your calm and your composure and do it the way you're doing it.
I appreciate
kudos.
That. But it does pale in comparison, what I do, to what you did in your career for this country. So Appreciate you you doing that and being a great example to that future generation. And that future generation has some questions lined up for you.
Okay.
So if it's okay, they got a microphone back there. They're gonna be jumping on, and they got some questions they're gonna be throwing your way.
Excuse me. So what exactly do you say, with all the accomplishments you've done, from being a fighter pilot to now in law, a reporter, what do you think has been an inspiration for that? Like, what's been a driving motivation in that? Is it since childhood or something of the sort, or is it just out of nowhere, just spontaneous?
Okay, I'll say to you that you can't pick your parents. You get lucky with your parents, and I got great luck with my parents. My mother I'm an accident. I was born much later. My parents are much older. There's a big gap between my sister and I, which I remind her of frequently. So I'm, in essence, not supposed to be here. But I'm lucky that I am, and God and the Lord bless me that I am. My mother was an African-American woman who grew up in East Texas. In 1934, graduated from college. 1934, think about that. In East Texas, and you all know the history of our country, that for a woman of my mother's genetics to graduate college. My grandfather, her dad, went to medical school at Meharry College, an undergraduate, and we have athletes here, played football at the University of Iowa in 1909. And I have a picture of my grandfather on the Iowa football team. And as a matter of fact, the Iowa football team came to the Orange Bowl one year, and I was the moderator for the luncheon. And I took that picture and gave it and showed it to Kurt Ferentz, the Iowa coach, and the university president. And they took it to all of their players to show that, hey, the university had opened its doors to people of all backgrounds and genetics a century ago to do that. So with that on my mother's side, and my mother was a teacher, and my dad, he earns a scholarship to the University of Michigan in 1924 and goes back for his master's, doctorate. And I was a little kid. I see him get his honorary degree from the University of Michigan. And he was a superintendent of schools where I grew up. So I always came from a family where we might not have had piles of money, but we had piles of love and education and a dream instilled in all of us, and an ability to be able to come up with a plan to execute that dream. And I got lucky, with my education. I stopped playing football and got an academic scholarship at Temple University. The government gave me, and the taxpayers, and thank you, a $1 million education flying airplanes and learning how to be a leader and organize people and serve our country. And as I was saying, NBC and Telemundo paid for my bar license. So I'm pretty much the good freeloader when it comes to education along the way. And I encourage everybody to do the same. So that's how, I believe in getting as much education about as many things as you can, and then utilizing that education in a positive way.
So as a member of the older generation, as well as like a huge member of the press, a lieutenant colonel in the Army.
Wait, what are you trying to say, man? Older generation? Like, what's happening here?
Well, the more mature generation, because, the kids in my generation here, we don't really have any experience of life before, like, the effects of 9/11. So I wanted to ask you, like, your perspective from that and how that really changed the world, and especially since, you're literally a reporter, and as well as like a military personnel. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Obviously, 9/11 was a dramatic day that did change the world and has changed the world across the board. And I will show and use 9/11 as an example of the greatness of our country. And I hope we can apply this greatness in our country to other things that are impacting all of our communities across our country in a negative way, with violence in our communities, and violence with weapons, and being able to protect people. On 9/11, you had people that we could say they had a mental health disorder where somebody was able to convince them that flying airplanes into buildings with a lot of people was a good idea. So I think we can all agree that that is mentally unsound. And when it transpired, what did our country do? We came up with a plan and said, that's not going to happen again. And what did that plan involve? It involved us giving up some of our freedom to travel, which is a right to, you got to take off your shoes, you got to take off your belt, you got to take off your coat, you got to send your backpack and your briefcase through that machine over there. And we've done an incredible job since that day concerning safety and security. Because how many airplanes have flown into buildings since 9/11? Not one. Zero. Not one. So the great thing our country has done, and that's a perfect example of how we can do things and do them right, is that we put systems and procedures in place to stop that from happening, and it has. And therefore, you can get on an airplane now with almost 100% certainty that the people who are supposed to be flying it will continue to do so.
We got time for about one or two more questions.
I don't know if we can take his question. He has on the wrong
the Boston
shirt
Celtics.
with the Boston Celtics.
Yeah.
But we like, okay.
Anyway.
We
So,
like you anyway.
as a reporter, you have to always report the truth, right?
That's
So,
the way it's done.
So what do you do when you get a story that sometimes conflicts with a personal interest or a belief?
Okay, well, you shouldn't be on that story. In legal terms, what we call that is recusing yourself. You know, if a judge has a conflict or an elected official has a conflict or a personal interest in a particular matter, that they need to recuse themselves from it. And when you run across a circumstance or a situation like that, and especially with our rules at NBC, I tell people all the time, hey, look, when we put something on it, or I put my name on it, or our team had put that broadcast out there, it's legally sound, journalistically sound, and ethically sound. Otherwise, we're not going to put our name on it. And so therefore, if there is any of that type of conflict, whether it's a personal relationship, whether it's a circumstance or a situation of a person that may have been in a tragedy similar to that themselves, that you simply recuse yourself from that situation so that you're not involved in it whatsoever at all, and a member of the team that can bring the independence that we demand can go ahead and do that and go forward with it.
All right, this is gonna be the last question. Final question I have for you is, you're a person of a million interests, right? What does Will do for entertainment? What is your favorite thing to watch, do, see? I'm trying to find the entertained Will in all of this.
Wow. Okay. Because I am a pretty regimented person. After my morning prayers and meditation and getting everything right with God, then I'm at the gym, and then which I enjoy. But I would say in my free time, I'm on a Netflix, or Amazon Prime. I'm a James Bond type guy, Jason Bourne, Jack Reacher type, any kind of suspense of those types of things. So I enjoy that. And I really enjoy traveling and going different places and trying to learn about as many different cultures that I can.
What's the current show you're watching right now?
I just finished watching something called The Night Agent. That is about a guy that, has a lot of things that transpire to him, along the way in his journey. And he's a, FBI agent that gets stuck in what's supposed to be a bad job at the White House in the basement. And the phone never rings. But if the phone did ring, something really crazy happened, and he's down there and the phone rings. And that launches him off on a crazy mission.
That's awesome. Great question, guys.
Yep.
Appreciate you guys. Another thing we do a little different, we turn it over to you. You get to ask any questions you have of me, maybe one or two questions, which now I'm a little nervous because you do this for a living. So everybody else throws little softballs, but I think you're a lot more prepared.
Look, I'm going to ask you something I kind of talked about a little bit earlier. How and why did you decide to go into public office? And what's your biggest frustration of dealing with trying to, legitimately run a large city here in Miami-Dade County, but address and deal with what happens on social media and how to deal with, I have a big problem now where you and your students know, I'm an evidence-based person. There's got to be some truth to what the information is now. And that's a big fear of mine, that the truth is like whatever somebody says it is. No, that's not true. That's not true.
That is true.
So
You're right.
how do you cope and manage and deal with that in your situation and try to serve the community the best you can? Because I'm sure before you went on this route, you had a dream and a vision.
Yeah, listen, you have to be the change that you want to see in the world, right? So I believed that we could do better as a community. So I got involved in our committee system. I used to be an aide in the state legislature. And I said, you know what, it's time to move on from being in behind the scenes to now being the guy, right? Being the guy in front, taking the responsibility. So I did that, was successful. But one of my biggest frustrations, and being very honest with you when it comes to social media and all that, it's that it's created sometimes a toxic environment. Not so much for me, it doesn't bother me anymore. But there are a lot of other good people in our society who would be great public servants that don't want to do it. Like literally, I have a major challenge trying to convince great people in our community, incredibly ethical folks, high character, intelligent, hardworking, who would be great elected officials, and they don't want to do it. They tell me, Manny, this is not worth it. We just recently lost one of who decided not to run for re-election because he was like, look, this is just not worth it because of what you have to deal with. So the positive of social media and this environment we live in is that you disseminate information relatively quickly, and I've been pretty good at that, right? We've gotten to the point that we put out something and tens of thousands of people see it. The bad part of that is that we give microphones to folks sometimes who maybe their own neighbors don't even listen to them. Maybe their own family doesn't listen to them, but now they see us, they're forced to listen to us. And sometimes the toxic nature of local government has dissuaded. I can tell you, I will tell you this, I've seen it firsthand, has dissuaded dozens of people from getting involved. They're like, this is not worth it. And then sometimes what you're left with, it's not the ideal, sometimes not the ideal elected officials. I mean, you see it on the county level, the state level. We live in Florida. I mean, there's so many talented people. We live in Dade County, right? Mm-hmm. And you would think, but there's so many folks that don't want to be part of it, because you're right, they don't want their families to get hurt themselves. I'll give you an example. When I ran for mayor, and I've shared this with the students before, I had my dad and my mom call me crying, and I'm in the middle of the campaign. I'm like, hey, Mom, Dad, what's going on? And they were both crying. I was like, everything okay? He's like, no, I just got this mailer in the mail that said you're a criminal and got arrested. And they were crying. I was like, listen, just throw it away. It doesn't matter. But then that's when I realized how it impacts people's my parents were literally crying. They were like, how can this happen? Like, how can every person in our community got this? And that's when I realized that human factor and how toxic things have gotten, where a lot of good people just like, I don't want to be part of it, right? I bet if I asked, Lou, you're going to run for office one day? See? Anybody here want to run for office? And that's becoming a challenge, right? So I hope Willard Shepard, right, in the future maybe decides to get involved. But folks like you have to get it, because it's getting more and more toxic every day, and less good, ethical, forward-thinking individuals want to get involved. So I'm being very transparent. That is the truth, and I've seen it happen on my own city council.
Okay, well, as we say, keep doing your thing.
Yeah, we keep.
What were we talking about with Eminem? How many shots you get?
One shot.
Got one shot.
Anybody want to rap that song? No?
Do it.
Hey. No, but that's pretty cool. Quoting, you know the whole song, or?
I know some of the song.
All right, we get Willard to hit it out
You
here.
know, there you go.
What? You got the beat? No? I think that'll go viral.
I
No?
haven't toiled in the darkness with that rap yet. So, okay?
All right.
So, when I get my one shot,
we'll make it
I'm going to
happen.
throw it.
We'll make it happen. We'll make it happen.
Okay?
So, Willard, in closing, how do you inspire? Some words of inspiration, motivation for that next Willard Shepard who wants to follow in your footsteps, serve our country, move on, be an attorney, be a champion boxer, and more importantly, be one of the most trusted voices on TV here in South Florida. How do you inspire that next Willard who follows in your footsteps?
Well, I mean, I have people that inspired me. So I'm honored that you said that. But I would just tell, and it doesn't have to be any of those three things, whatever your dream is, have a dream, toil in the darkness to make it work, come up with a great plan that's going to execute all your strengths, and you'll have obstacles along the way, but you will be prepared and trained to overcome them, and you will get to where your dream is and the vision that you have for it. But you have to be willing to put the time and the energy and the effort into it, and take your failures along that route and have them make you stronger. If any person tells you, hey, that was easy, no, that's not the case. That's not the case at all. People that have done incredibly great things in their life had extreme disappointments and heartbreak all along the way. When something doesn't happen and it doesn't go your way, don't let it break you down. It's just a setup for you to succeed down the road.
You got that right.
Yep.
And there you have it, the incredible story of Willard Shepard, an amazing human being, a 305 South Florida legend. We appreciate you coming on, Willard. Thank you very much.
All righty, my brother. It was all good.
Tune in next Wednesday on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.
Manny, thank you.